I sat down with State Senator Julian Cyr to discuss some changes on Beacon Hill. We discussed addressing wastewater concerns on Cape Cod and a new short-term rental tax making its way through Beacon Hill. I'm in studio with State Senator Julian Cyr. Julian, how are you?
Hi, Paula. Good to be with you.
So, hard few days here for Cape Cod.
These have been really hard days for Cape Cod. For yes, for Yarmouth and for Barnstable, but across the region, certainly mourning the loss of Officer Sean Gannon. Just a horrible, tragic incident. And I think we're all still very much reeling from that. Today we're taping. Earlier was the funeral, and we had it was just an incredible show of support from law enforcement. Certainly folks in state service and the governor and attorney general and down the list. But it's still pretty tough. But especially for folks here, certainly in the mills in that neighborhood and the Yarmouth Police Department and how tight knit our communities are here, right? And you really realize that about how close we all were, either to Officer Gannon or to his wife Dara. It's been a tough week, but you try to show up, and I think what's just important is that at this moment you pay your respects, you make sure that the family feels really supported.
Yep.
And then there's other considerations, but I think first we've got to really pay our respects.
Yeah, I think the show of support throughout Cape Cod this past week has been enormous. I would use the word unprecedented.
Yeah.
Something like this has not hit us for a really long time. We haven't had something like this. That was a tragedy that just literally crossed every line that there was.
And I hope we never do
Exactly.
again. It definitely it's.
Right.
I was talking to the members of the select board in Yarmouth, and they were saying it's like you never want this to happen, and once you go through this, you never want your community to go through that again. But there's some big unanswered questions I think that we're going to get to, and our legislative delegation, which is very close, Tim Whalen, Will Crocker, and I, and the whole delegation really. I think we'll have some conversations. I think specifically looking at why this clearly very dangerous individual who had so many counts against him, why he was out in society. We're gonna look to take a look at that and try to answer some of those questions, in appropriate time.
Right.
But I think those are important. Those are questions I certainly have. I think a lot of folks have, and that we need to get to.
Right.
But first we need to pay our respects to Officer Gannon and to his family, and just really, and I think also too, especially for this police department, really. Giving them the time and the space to heal. This is a very traumatic event.
And they handled it, across the board. This was a multi-agency event.
Yep.
They handled it, just all the logistics. I can't imagine. We've had well over 5,000 people travel onto Cape in the last 24 hours. And the logistics of lodging them, all the restaurants have stepped up to feed them. All the lodging areas have, offered free rooms to all the law enforcement people that came to pay their respects. So, we'll move on. We are Cape Cod strong, and at this point, all of our feelings are with their family and hoping that they heal.
Yeah.
So there's other news on the state Beacon Hill. You got some stuff into committee. We've got the short-term rental bill.
So this is kind of the time of year where we're kind of in the home stretch, right? The legislative session ends July 31st, and so there's a lot of activity. Something that's been a real priority for this region for a long time has been expansion of room occupancy, just from a pure fairness perspective, right? Hotels and motels have been paying this tax. If you're a short-term rental, you're an Airbnb or another rental, you haven't been. And so actually the House and the Senate both passed legislation in recent weeks that is going to establish this. We've got different versions. The House version is much more complicated and involved. Essentially, it's trying to respond to concerns that they have in cities like Boston, right, where you see a lot of, you have someone who goes and maybe purchases a brownstone, which would have been 4 or 5 apartments, and it's turned into Airbnbs.
Right.
We don't really have that concern down here. The Senate version is much more simple. It basically says, look, you're renting a room for a night or a week, whether it's in a motel or an Airbnb, or you're renting a home, this excise is going to apply. And so I think it's something that a number of towns have prioritized, specifically because they get a local option from that. So there's a 2 to 6% local option. Here in Barnstable, you're at 6%. Yarmouth is at 6%. Provincetown is at 6%. Most other communities in the Cape are at 4%. But that's going to be a significant chunk of change that'll come to the municipality. Probably the largest kind of infusion that we'll see anytime soon. From a local aid perspective. So I think that's why it was a real priority. And so now it's in a conference committee. Those details have to be ironed out. The good news is Representative Sarah Peak, who represents the Lower Cape, she's actually on the conference committee. Great. So we're going to really have the Cape it will be strongly represented, and this should be completed by the end of the session.
Right, and some of that local tax can go for infrastructure.
Of course,
and that's one of the more important things I think that comes from using this tax as a local option. This excise tax is the ability to fund projects that have really literally been put on the back burner for years.
Yep.
There's not been the money. There's been cuts over the years in local funding and local aid. So this may help shore up some of those infrastructure roads and sidewalks and
it defrays the cost from property taxpayers.
Right.
Right. Which everything in this state, how it works municipally is it's all on the backs of property taxpayers. And there's another piece in this room occupancy bill that the Cape delegation was able to get in there as it relates to infrastructure, and it's a really big deal around wastewater. So we're excited about that as well.
All right, talk a little bit about the wastewater. This is one of those things that, I guess you call it the elephant in the room on Cape Cod, right? We know it's a problem. We kind of go about our business. The commission's been working on some plans. Some towns have been doing their little areas. But as a region, we really need to tackle this together.
And we've got a $4 billion problem. We're under court action. And you have to address the problem, given just how we share our estuaries and our water bodies, it has to be dealt with in some sort of coordinated fashion. So of that $4 billion problem, what I've been really focused on, and the whole delegation's been focused on, is, all right, how do you get some state support for this, right? So if we have to just pay $4 billion in the backs of property taxpayers, you're probably talking about almost a doubling of property taxes, or a betterment that's really, really burdensome. Folks are already struggling to eke out a living here. So how do we get some state support? And in both the House and Senate version, what we do is we propose to establish a Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust. This would be a subset of the existing state revolving loan fund program that's administered by the Treasurer's Office. So we don't create a new bureaucracy. We use existing resources and staff. And this would be a place where we're able to pool resources to help fund wastewater projects across the region. Yes, here on Cape Cod, also on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, who also have the same problem. And how we fund that is in part through room occupancy. So we add a 2.75 surcharge onto the room occupancy across every town. That's going to generate millions of dollars, which again is going to help pay for wastewater. And also too, what it does is it kind of targets part of the reason why we have a $4 billion problem and not maybe a $2 billion or $1 billion is because we have to build infrastructure for all the people who are here in our busiest weeks and our busiest days. And so this is a way for the people who come to the Cape to contribute to it.
Something to keep it beautiful.
To keep it beautiful, to keep, and I think of Wendy Northcross at the Cape Cod Chamber saying, look, if I don't got clean water, I don't have anything to sell. And so, this is something the Cape Cod Chamber has supported, environmentalists. The Association to Preserve Cape Cod has called this the single biggest piece of legislation that we've gotten done for the Cape in the last 20 years. So there's some slight differences between the House and the Senate version, but because it's in both bills, it's going to happen. So it's a really big, I think something that's a game changer and really going to help us move forward in remediating our environment. I think it's going to provide some development opportunities, right? Because with sewering, you can build more densely.
There's the blue
you can
economy.
Have those, so definitely a good news story, and I think something that's really going to help us have a more sustainable future here.
Well, that's good news on a solemn
On a
day,
very
but
sad day,
you know,
yes.
at this point, we're going to look for that stuff to move forward in Beacon Hill. And your next update, hopefully, you'll have all the answers and to say, "Hey,
I don't know
here's
about
the money,"
that,
right?
but yeah, we aim. But and welcome to you, and congratulations to you. on
Thank
this
you. I
position.
appreciate it.
Yep.